I've got one that can see.
He's a tall Caucasian male, doesn't appear armed, wearing sunglasses.
I don't like this one bit.
For the devil sends the beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 660.
Can I believe that what I saw that night was real and not just fantasy? Just what I saw in my old dreams, were they reflections of my woman staring back at me? 'Cause in my dreams, it's always there, the evil face that twists my mind and brings me to despair.
Excuse me, my friend. I've been wanting to speak to you. You're an American?
Ah, yes, America. My name is Ahmed. I studied philosophy at Harvard for many, many years, though Oxford is my real alma mater. I also studied in Vienna, and now I study here. Well, they put me here. They say I raped a little child. I've been here a very, very long time, and they'll never let me go. They won't let you go either. I mean, they tell you they'll let you go, but in fact you stay. You'll never go from here. Yeah. You see, we all of us come from a factory, and sometimes the factory makes bad machines that don't work, so they put them here. The bad machines don't know that they're bad machines, but the people at the factory know. They know that you are one of the machines that doesn't work. Well, I think we've spoken enough for today. I wish you good night.
The Scythians were called Umman Manda by the Chaldeans, people of Manda, and Manda is the name of Saturn. The Phoenicians regarded El Saturn as their chief deity. Eusebius informs us that El, a name used also in the Bible as a name for God, was the name his history to Abibal, king of Beirut, and was approved by him and by the investigators of truth in his time. Now the times of these men fall even before the date of the Trojan War, and approach nearly to the times of Moses, as is shown by the successions of the kings of Phoenicia. And Sanchuniathon, who made a complete collection of ancient history from the records in the various cities and from the registers in the temples, and wrote in the Phoenician language with a love of truth, lived in the reign of Semiramis, the queen of the Assyrians, who is recorded to have lived before the Trojan War or in those very times. And the works of Sanchuniathon were translated into the Greek tongue by Philo of Byblos. These things being so, Sanchuniathon, who was a man of much learning and great curiosity, and desirous of knowing the earliest history of all nations from the creation of the world, searched out with great care the history of Tammuz, knowing that of all men under the sun, Tammuz was the first who thought of the invention of letters and began the writing of record. And he laid the foundation, as it were, of his history, by beginning with him whom the Egyptians called Thoth, and the Alexandrians Thoth, translated by the Greeks into Hermes. But the most recent of the writers on religion rejected the real events from the beginning, and having invented allegories and myths, and formed a fictitious affinity to the cosmic phenomena, established mysteries, and overlaid them with a cloud of absurdity, so that one cannot easily discern what really occurred. But he, having lighted upon the collections of secret writings of the Ammonians, which were discovered in the shrines and of course were not known to all men, applied himself diligently to the study of them all. And when he had completed the investigation, he put aside the original myth and the allegories, and so completed his proposed work, until the priests who followed in later times wished to hide this away again, and to restore the mythical character, from which time mysticism began to rise up, not having byblos, and from them is born Epigeus, or Autochon, whom they afterwards called Uranus, so that from him they named the element above us Uranus, because of the excellence of its beauty. And he has a sister born of the aforesaid parents, who is called Gaia, and from her, he says, because of her beauty, they called the earth by the same name. And their father, the Most High Elion, died in an encounter with wild beasts, and was deified, and his children offered to him libations and sacrifices. It was a custom of the ancients in great crisis of danger for the rulers of a city or nation, in order to avert the common ruin, to give up the most beloved of their children for sacrifice as a ransom to the avenging daemons. And those who were thus given up were sacrificed with mystic rites. Kronos then, whom the Phoenicians call Elis, who was king of the country and subsequently after his decease, was deified as the star Saturn, had by a nymph of the country named Anobret an only begotten son, whom they on this account called Ayud, the only begotten being so called among the Phoenicians. And when very great dangers from war had beset the country, he arrayed his son in royal apparel, and prepared an altar, and sacrificed him. After this, Kronos builds a wall round his own dwelling, and founds the first city in Phoenicia, Byblos. Soon after this, he became suspicious of his own brother Atlas, and with the advice of Hermes, threw him into a deep pit and buried him. At about this time, the descendants of the Dioscuri put together rafts and ships and made voyages, and being cast ashore near Mount Cassius, consecrated a temple there. And the allies of Elis, who is Kronos, were surnamed Elohim, as these same, who were surnamed after Kronos, would have been called Chroni. And Kronos, having a son named Sadidas, dispatched him with his own sword, because he regarded him with suspicion and deprived him of life, thus becoming the murderer of his son. In like manner, he cut off the head of his own daughter, so that all the gods were dismayed at the disposition of Kronos.
My next guest was used also in worshiping the devil, participated in human sacrifice rituals and cannibalism. She says her family has been involved in rituals for generations. She is currently in extensive therapy, suffers from multiple personality disorder, meaning she's blocked out many of the terrifying and painful memories of her childhood. Meet Rachel, who is also in disguise to protect her identity. You come from generations of ritualistic abuse?
Yes, my family has an extensive family tree, and they keep track of who's been involved and who hasn't been involved. And it's gone back to like 1700.
And so you were...
Right, I was born into a family that believes in this.
And does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl?
Definitely.
And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country. It's not just my own family.
Really? And so who knows about it? Lots of people now.
I talked to a police detective in the Chicago area, and several of my friends know, and I've spoke publicly before. And
so when you were brought up in this kind of evilness, did you just think it was normal?
I've blocked out a lot of the memories I had because of my multiple personality disorder. But yes, I mean, it's like if you grow up with something, you think it's normal. Mm-hmm. I always thought...
So what kinds of things? You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to, you know...
Whose babies?
There were people who bred babies in our family. No one would know about it. A lot of people were overweight, so you couldn't tell if they were pregnant or not, or they would supposedly go away for a while and then come back. The other thing I want to point out, not all Jewish people sacrifice babies. I mean,
no.
It's not a very
we kind of know
thing.
That.
I just want to point that out.
This is the first time I heard of any Jewish people sacrificing babies. But anyway, so you witnessed the sacrifice?
Right. When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Uh-huh. Power.
The nature then of the dragon of serpents, Tammuz himself regarded as divine, and so again after him did the Phoenicians and Egyptians. For this animal was declared by him to be of all reptiles most full of breath and fiery, in consequence of which it also exerts an unsurpassable swiftness by means of its breath, without feet and hands or any of the other external members by which the other animals make their movements. It also exhibits forms of various shapes, and in its progress makes spiral leaps as swift as it chooses. It is also most long-lived, and its nature is to put off its old skin, and so not only to grow young again, but also to assume a larger growth. And after it has fulfilled its appointed measure of age, it is self-consumed. In like manner as Tammuz himself has set down in his sacred books, for which reason this animal has also been adopted in temples and in mystic rites. We have spoken more fully about it in the memoirs entitled Ethothea, in which we prove that it is immortal and is self-consumed, as is stated before. For this animal does not die by a natural death, but only if it is struck by a violent blow. The Phoenicians call it good demon. In like manner, the Egyptians also surname it Neph, and they add to it the head of a hawk because of the hawk's activity. The first and foremost divine being is a serpent with the form of a hawk, extremely graceful, which whenever he opened his eyes, filled all with light in his original birthplace, but if he shut his eyes, darkness came. But Astarte, who was Asherah, the wife of El, the greatest goddess, and Zeus Damaris, and Adonis, king of gods, reigned over the country with the consent of Kronos. And Astarte set the head of a bull upon her own head as a mark of royalty. And in traveling around the world, she found a star that had fallen from the sky, which she took up and consecrated in the holy land of Tyre. And the Phoenicians say that Astarte is Aphrodite. Kronos also, in going round the world, gives the kingdom of Attica to his own daughter Athena. But on the occurrence of a pestilence and mortality, Kronos offers his only begotten son as a whole burnt offering to his father Uranus, and circumcises himself, compelling his allies also to do the same. And not long after, another of his sons by Rhea, named Muth, having died, he deifies him, and the Phoenicians call him Thanatos, Death, and Pluto. And after this, Kronos gives the city Byblos to the goddess Baeltis, who is also called Dione, and Beirut to Poseidon, and to the Cabiari, and Agrote, and the Helios, who also consecrated the remains of Pontus at Beirut. The god Tammuz imitated the features of the gods who were his companions, Kronos and Dagon and the rest, and gave form to the sacred characters of the letters. He also devised for Kronos, as insignia of royalty, 4 eyes in front and behind, but 2 of them quietly closed, and upon his shoulders 4 wings, 2 is spread for flying, and 2 is folded. And the symbol meant that Kronos could see when asleep, and sleep while waking. And similarly in the case of the wings, that he flew while at rest, and was at rest when flying. But to each of the other gods, who were the Elohim, he gave 2 wings upon the shoulders, as meaning they accompanied Kronos in his flight. And to Kronos himself, again he gave 2 wings upon his head, one representing the all-ruling mind, and one the senses. And when Kronos came into the south country, he gave all Egypt to the god Tautus, who is Hermes, that it might be his royal dwelling place. The Phoenicians, in the great calamities of war, or pestilence, or drought, used to dedicate one of their dearest friends and sacrifice him to Kronos. And of those who thus sacrificed, the Phoenician history is full, which sanchuniathon wrote in the Phoenician language, and philobiblos translated into Greek in 8 books. And Ister, in his collection of Cretan sacrifices, says that the Curites in old times used to sacrifice young boys to Kronos. Now it is said that the ancients offered these sacrifices to Kronos, and was done in Carthage while the city remained, and is done among the Celts unto this day, and in certain other of the western nations who offer human sacrifices. But that Hercules, wishing to put a stop to the custom of this sacrifice, set up the altar on the hill of Saturn, and dedicated holy offerings hallowed by pure fire. They alleged also that Kronos was set against them, inasmuch as they used in earlier times to sacrifice the best of their sons to this god, but afterwards bought children secretly and reared them and sent them for the sacrifice. And when an inquiry was held, some of those who had been sacrificed were found to have been supposititious. So when they had taken thought of this, and saw the enemy encamping close to their walls, they had a superstitious fear of having abolished the honors which their fathers had paid to the gods. And being eager to amend their errors, they chose out 200 of the most distinguished sons and offered them as a public sacrifice. And others who were under suspicion gave themselves up of their own accord, in a number not less than 300. Now they had a brazen statue of Kronos, stretching forth his upturned hands, inclined towards the ground in such a way that the boy placed thereon rolled off and fell into a pit full of fire. And so were the days of El, who is Kronos.
Go on. Go on! Go on. Go on.
Good morning, my American friend. There will be trouble if you go this way. A good Turk always walks to the right. Left is communist, right is good. All right, man. No. See, you must go the other way. The other way is good. Where are you going? Why don't you walk the wheel with us? What is the matter, my American friend? What has upset you? The bad machine doesn't know he's a bad machine. You still don't believe it? Hmm? Still don't believe you're a bad machine? To know yourself is to know God, my friend. The factory knows. That's why they put you here. You'll see. You'll find out. In time, you'll know.
Oh, I know. I already know. I know that you are a bad machine. That's why the factory keeps you here. Do you know how I know? Huh? I know because I'm from the factory. I make the machine.